sparkling gold, or is it garbage? Come on, tell me what I gotta know. Is the story being told? Garbage or gold? Hey Disney Afternoon Gang, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jake. If you're returning, you know I love it when you come back. And if you're new, I do all kinds of Disney content, including subscription boxes, hauls, trips, vintage trivia, storytelling reviews. If it's Disney, we're doing it. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next Disney adventure. All right, gang, today we are talking about story structure and The Little Mermaid, that 1989 classic film that kicked off an entire generation of storytelling gold. So it's no surprise where I'm going to land on this one. I don't think it would have started a renaissance if it wasn't gold, and I don't think it would have been around lasting for as long as it has 30 plus years later. But why is it gold? What makes it a good story? What makes the storytelling strong? And what makes the storytelling universal and last across generations? So, let's review the 5 categories. We've got structure, world rules, stakes, song setup, and our little miscellaneous category. That's how we're reviewing and analyzing these films, trying to do it in a little more academic way rather than an emotional way, because nobody can deny the emotional connection you have with a piece of art, a film, a painting, a song. That's inexplicable, and maybe even for reasons that are only particular to you or a certain subset of people. I'm trying to look at a more universal approach to why stories work the way they do and why they don't work. So let's talk about a structure. I've got my notes lined up. The opening of this film is 5 minutes of pure storytelling genius. Everything's in the natural order. We start with the gray clouds and the birds flying. The birds are in the air. We got the ship in the ocean. Humans are on the ship. Fish are swimming in the sea. Everything's as the world should be, the normal way. People aren't in the water, fish aren't on the boat, birds aren't swimming, etc. So the subtext of all of that is telling us that this is the world that is, and maybe isn't going to be the world that will be in the future. And this show is bookended so beautifully. The opening is gray, muted, very dull colors, and it takes place on a boat on the water. The last image of a film is a boat on the water, full of color, full of life, that big rainbow that Triton paints over the sky at the end. 2 contrasting images of the same setup. And those 2 things kind of give us a picture of the journey from the beginning of the film to the end of the film without actually telling us anything. These are all things that kind of work back in the psychology of our mind. We've got this ship at the beginning, and the clear idea is that fish exist in the water, humans exist on the land. But it's no surprise to notice the ship itself is an interesting analogy, because it relates to the image that's in between those 2 extremes. It's not the land, but they're not in the water either. And so the ship kind of exists in between the 2 worlds. And that's why it ends so beautifully as well, with the same image of the ship, but in a different place than when we started it. There's the fish, if you remember, the fish that the sailor waves in Eric's face and jumps back in the water. Another image that fish don't belong on land. The fish is dying to get back into the water. So that seems to be the normal pattern, the thing that should be the expected thing. And of course, this works because it's playing on tropes that we already know. You don't have to explain to us how fish works and how boats work and how water and animals and fishermen and all of that. You don't have to explain all of that to us. So these are working on layers upon layers of known knowledge and then sort of symbolic knowledge at the same time. The prologue, the opening song, we'll talk about a little bit later. But so then the fish escapes, right? The fish goes into the water, and we've established kind of the human world. And now we're under the sea, establishing maybe a less familiar world to us, because immediately we follow the fish on a journey. The fish swims past coral and a few other things, and then suddenly the music swells, and a merman appears, followed by a mermaid, and then a host of merfolk swimming. And they're all, kind of moving together towards this castle. And we understand that now there's a community of these people down there. And it takes a little bit longer to establish this world because it's maybe less familiar than, of course, the world we know above the surface, as it were. But equally so, very quickly, the kingdom is established. We understand we don't know King Triton's name, maybe necessarily, although I think the fish announcer announces it, but we understand the ruler, and then the people who are there kind of celebrating the ruler. And this all happens within the first 5.5 minutes of the film. In 5.5 minutes, they have set up two juxtaposing worlds, have played with some imagery about what's normal. Fish belong in the water, humans belong on the land. And sort of set up a little bit, at least with the humans, the kind of mystery that they apply towards this sort of fictitious world of the mer people. Even though it's a generational story, they are still kind of suspicious. And of course, it plays on that idea that mermaids were the sort of sirens that led ships into the shoals and the different things where they would crash and, wreckages would happen. And then just a few minutes after that, we have the song with the girls, which we'll talk about in a little bit with the sisters. But then it cuts to Ariel, who we know is going to be the protagonist, because everything we've done has made a point to Ariel. Triton and Sebastian talk about her. The song is all about her. She's not there. Triton overreacts, calling her name. And then we cut to Ariel. What's interesting about Ariel's first sort of statement, I guess, in film, is that she mirrors the exact same imagery that the fish who is trying to escape being caught on the ship in the opening. So now we have a fish in its natural element with a boat, further emphasizing that not only do fish not live above the surface, but humans don't do well under the water. So we have this wreckage, this destroyed thing, because humans don't belong there. Had the fish stayed caught, the fish would have become dinner, right? And ended its life. So they're juxtaposing these two worlds of one doesn't belong and there's consequences, and the other doesn't belong here and there are consequences. But Ariel is interested in those two things meeting. And that's where we get a first glimpse of what drives our main hero. It's clear that she's structurally an adventurous sort, which gives us some buy-in to the fact that she's going to be able to follow through on her dream. She faces a shark. She's going to kind of scary, unexplored territory. And she kind of all does it with a laugh at Flounder's expense, giving her some strength of character, even for someone so young. Ursula's backstory is interesting. One of the problems in the Broadway stage adaptation, I feel, is that they tried to over-explain the backstory, the sister and brotherhood of Ursula and Triton. Ursula basically just says, when I lived in the palace, things were great. Then they banished me for practicing, basically some kind of dark magic or an illegal magic. And it's not connected to Ariel's wish. Ursula really just wants revenge on being socially shunned. And so it explains enough, but doesn't over explain it. And I think that's probably a trap that a lot of more modern films have fallen into, this need to over explain. And I think in an analogy based sort of fairy tale, as it were, sometimes fewer details are better. This, of all of the shows, of all of the sort of films, is the most structured like a typical Broadway musical, which is not surprising coming from Howard Ashman, who was one of the writers on the film and also the lyricist for the film, and Alan Menken, who wrote Little Shop of Horrors before this, among other things, and had come from the world of theater. So this is very structured like a musical. In fact, the point of no return, which is in a musical, the point you want to get to before the Act 1 curtain comes down, you want the character to cross a threshold that they can no longer return from, a marriage, a death, a bad choice, etc. If you've seen Wicked, Elphaba learns to fly, and kind of makes her choice to rebel against the natural, her sort of societal place, and rebel against the wizard and kind of that ruling class a little bit. Elphaba's crossed the line that she can't return from. And so at the almost exact halfway point of The Little Mermaid, I think it's 45 minutes in with another 42 minutes to go, Ariel makes the decision to become a human. She decides to give in to Ursula's sort of plea or bargain deal, and she can't come back from that. Once she's made that choice, she's on this path to try to stay human. And that's, that gives us some momentum moving forward, that gives us a timeline to work from. So structurally, everything is propelling us forward. All right, let's move on to some of the world rules. They're pretty simple in this, and I think they're pretty simple in most films. Humans are, I think Triton says humans are barbarians to merfolk, right? So there is this negative impression of that humans are all fish killers and, that kind of a thing. And then there's apparent conflict set up pretty early, so we understand the sort of large macro version of the world, and now we understand the micro version of the world, the intimate relationship between these kind of key people. And then the magic, very clearly delineated. Here's what you're going to get. Here's the timeline. You get to keep it. If you don't, these are the consequences of your choices. And so that gives us a little bit of urgency to the film, and this film stays clear to those rules rather than there being some like Deus Ex Machina of, oh well, you didn't really have to do it anyway. Ariel has real consequences at the end of this film. Okay, I think let's move on. Sorry, stakes. I skipped stakes accidentally. And this ties into the magic. There's 3 days to get the kiss, right? And so we know what's at stake. Ariel will become one of those little monster things, whatever they are. And that, again, tied to the world rules, is that the contact between human world and the moral world is strictly forbidden. So now we've got a broken societal law, and then we have this timeline of magic in order to do the thing that's sort of above and beyond what one should be doing. All right, in this film, I think some of the songs set up are some of the strongest in any Disney film to date. A lot of them are, strong, but this one's particularly compelling in my opinion. Fathoms Below, the song they sing on the ship, is that great quintessential prologue number. It gives us both worlds. Actually, we see humans, and then we hear the lyric about sort of the mystery of who these mer people are and sort of that. Part of your world comes out of an emotionally charged scene. Ariel is sort of sad and depressed. She's just been yelled at by her father, and an emotionally charged moment is a perfect place for a song. Not only that, this is Ariel's I Want song, that quintessential number, right? That's like, I'm this character, here's what I want. And then the writers have to go about proving that concept of whether they get what they want or whether they've wanted the wrong thing, or whether they want the right thing but go about it the wrong way. So out of this hurt and this emotion comes this small song that gets us to this really burning desire. Again, making the case for Ariel that she has the strength to do this. And then, of course, there is Ariel rescues Eric, and they're on land, and she sings. What I think is interesting, I'm going to talk about this in just a minute, but that Ariel wants to be a human before the love interest. I think that's something really key to remember. But then she has this connection, this infatuation, haven't we all, with a prince, and she kind of feels reassured again that she wants to be in this world, and sings her little reprise on the rock and all the waves coming up at us. Under the Sea. This is the best of all possible songs in that it is both charming and fun, and directly involves the plot. A convincing song is one of the great reasons to write a song for characters. It's born out of emotion. So Sebastian and Triton, Triton charges Sebastian with this idea that he has to keep track of Ariel. And Sebastian knows that Ariel is trouble, that she's interested in these human things. And so he's pacing and he says,
"Okay, so far, so good. I don't think the king knows. But it will not be easy keeping something like this a secret for long."
And we know immediately that he's not going to. It's just a matter of time before he explodes. And what better way if a character's going to explode than to be accompanied by music? And so we set up the whole world Under the Sea. But in a way, what that actually does is it turns... Ariel leaves, Flounder takes her away. They're not really that interested in that. And so it gets Ariel to a place of, this was the kind of dividing road. Sebastian presented a really great case for living under the sea in a charming and fun way. And Ariel could have gone that way and said, you know what, you're right. I'm content in my world and I'm going to do the thing that's expected of me. Instead, she veers to the right and begins really her journey. Poor Unfortunate Souls. Again, a charming and fun song that serves the plot so well. Not only is a song justified to introduce a new character, I think that's kind of a standard trope, but this is born out, again, it's kind of the opposite of Under the Sea, where Under the Sea was meant to convince Ariel to stay. Poor Unfortunate Souls is a song to convince Ariel to give in to Ursula's sort of help to get her wish. It's kind of interesting too, I thought, about the parallels between the fairy godmother that comes to Cinderella and grants the wish to go to the ball, to the thing, to the dream, and Ursula the Sea Witch, who negatively kind of offers all the same things and then has this caveat on top of it. She makes her choice, right? So by the end of the song has traveled us somewhere. She's convinced Ariel to make that journey, and she does get her legs. So the song takes us on a timeline. Les Poissons, this song's probably the one that's not necessary in the film, but it's interesting because it continues to further, while we've seen how merfolk feel about humans, right? That they're barbarians and fish eaters and destroyers of the ocean and all of this thing. We're actually now seeing the inverse of that on land, where Sebastian witnesses what humans actually feel like, or at least maybe the typical kind of human. They have the same disregard for fish. They are a little bit what people feared that they are. It reinforces this long-held traditions idea of that fish are always for eating, when maybe fish and merfolk and those people have feelings too. It's silly in a way because we still eat fish, obviously, but it's an analogy representative of a different kind of person, people, group, culture, race that you don't understand. But they do it through humor, which helps us to digest those sort of heavier topics a little bit better. Kiss the Girl is a fantastic suspenseful song in the guise of a love song, which I think is really fascinating. Unlike A Whole New World or Beauty and the Beast, where it's just clearly about a moment of love, this is about a moment of love that also has an end game to it. These are two people on an awkward first date, and we're trying to get like on a first name basis. And so it's this fun number that comes out of the side characters really trying to advance the plot. They want to see Ariel get her wish and stay a human, so they pitch in to help. And we get to the end of the song, they get to know each other, and we almost get there. That's the brilliance of it. We almost get there, because the audience now, on your first viewing, you're like, they're going to do it. And what's going to happen? And then that flipping over the boat, it angers you. It stirs up all the right emotions because you're still rooting for the character. So a love song in the guise of a helping song that leaves you with kind of an angry emotion, that is not an easy thing to do in 3 minutes of musical material. So the songs are brilliantly set up. I can't say enough about them. And then, of course, we get the climax of the film with the fight, and then we get the reprise of Part of Your World. Under my miscellaneous, remember when I said back a few minutes ago that Ariel wanted to be human before she saw Eric? And what I think is interesting, there's a lot of talk about these princess films that the girl pines for the guy, the girl changes for the guy. And don't get me wrong, these are all incredibly valid things. I want to see stories that are more about empowered people doing empowering things for themselves. But we can't underestimate a feeling of love. What's interesting for me is that Ariel wants to be human without any kind of romantic entanglement. She then sees Eric. He's attractive. He's a human. I don't think it's unfair of her to sort of be drawn in by him. But what's interesting is that Ursula, unlike the fairy godmother who comes to Cinderella out of this pure desire to go somewhere, to journey somewhere, Ursula comes to Ariel and doesn't address the human side of it. She addresses the infatuation. She takes advantage of Ariel's sort of secondary interaction or want for the human world. The primary want is Ariel wants to belong to a community that she feels a part of. And that, of course, is analogous to us. For anybody who, was raised in a certain way or was told certain things were wrong, and you looked at other people doing them or enjoying them or whatever, that's her real heart. But Ursula manipulates this sort of infatuated quality, that sort of negative quality of her trying to, get the prince as a prize, when really Ariel wants the humanity as a prize. Now, being a fairy tale, and also, Ariel being a good person, I think justifiably ends up with both of those things. She's happy being with Eric, and Eric is happy being with her, but she gets her wish to be on land. She gets her desire to be a part of that world, right? I just find that sort of interesting, different than maybe some of the other sort of prince and princess kind of stories. And so those are my thoughts. That's the Little Mermaid. Storytelling gold through and through. The whole thing pays off, from gray boat at the beginning to rainbow colorful boat at the end. And everything that happens in the between is in service of one story, carrying us from beat to beat to beat. I'd love to hear your comments. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. If you agree, was there something I said maybe that you haven't thought about before that you'll look forward to viewing on the next time you sit down and watch it? It's a brilliant film. Give a like, give a comment. If you're new to the Disney Afternoon Gang, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming up down the road. And until the next Disney Afternoon,